Hello and welcome to HubSpot's first live marketing debate. We have today our topic on, is Twitter dying as a social network? If you want to talk about it, tweet about it, ask a question to our debaters, go to hashtag #MKTGDebate. We're also going to be giving 3 tickets away to our inbound conference to the top 3 tweeters using that hashtag, where Kip and Laura will be there. So let's introduce our debaters. Kip Bodnar is the author of the Social Media B2B book, while Laura is the lead author of Twitter for Dummies. So both of them are very vested in Twitter and are going to talk about their stances. So let's start with you guys just introducing yourselves and saying why you have the stance that you have.
Laura?
Well, Twitter completely changed my life starting about 5 years ago when I first got on it. And don't get me wrong, I did the same blog post everybody else at least thought at some point of, this is so totally stupid, why would I ever use this? Then I found that it was a great way to follow inspiring, interesting, motivating people. You know, surround yourself with successful people is the oldest business success rule in the book. So I started doing that and things really, really blew up. I have kind of a crazy extreme story with Twitter. I'll let you Google it rather than take up the entire half hour telling it.
Cool. And so I'm Kip. I've been using Twitter for basically 5 years as well. I think we
About
joined
the same
Twitter
time.
within a month of each other. I think we looked. So it has had a profound impact on my life as well, and it's been really meaningful, but it's changed a lot since Laura and I started using it 5 years ago, some for the good, some for the bad, and it's kind of peaked, kind of plateaued, and there's a lot of data out there that kind of points to this, kind of lead off with it. There are about 89% of Americans know that Twitter exists, but only 10% actually use the service. There's a really big gap there.
15%. According to the Pew numbers, 15%
well,
of adults.
the Edison numbers are 10%.
Okay.
So I like the Edison guys. They're both trustworthy sources, but make it what you will.
Pew versus Edison
Right.
debate.
So that's kind of a beginning of my stance. But Anam, I know you had some questions and you wanted to kick this off. So
let's go with those stats that we just used. So according to the Pew report, 66% of American adults say they're using social networks. 15% of American adults say they're using Twitter. Do you think this percentage is any indicator of the popularity of Twitter amongst all the other networks? Are people on other networks more than Twitter?
Oh, you're going to make me answer.
Oh, no, I can go. I think, yes, people are on other networks more than Twitter. Yes. 50% of U.S. Americans use Facebook, I believe, is the current stat. So there's this really big divide. And I'll concede a little bit to Laura that, the interesting thing here is that 89% of Americans are familiar with Twitter, but 86% of Americans have internet access. So more people know about Twitter than have access to the internet. So Laura's like, it's this Twitter thing. But awareness and usage, and awareness and actually contributing to the platform are 2 very, very different things. And so, yes, it has this very kind of big ubiquity, but the fact that its adoption and usage rate is kind of slowly clumping along and growing compared to something like Facebook is really different. I think it's a lot different than I think you and I probably thought it would be 5 years ago, from when we thought they were kind of going to grow up neck and neck in parallel to each other.
So let's unpack a couple of the words you just used. You're saying Twitter's peaked, but now you're saying it's growing slowly. Those are 2 different things.
Well, it has grown slowly in the past.
Let's talk about what usage means. 89% of people are aware of Twitter because Twitter has become ubiquitous. When was the last time you saw a post from Facebook in print, on television, on the radio, on every website you go to, where you see tweets all over the place now? They are embedded, they are fused in. The reason that more people are aware of Twitter than are even on the internet is because its ubiquity of usage goes well beyond going into the software, logging in, having an account, and publishing. How do most Americans use YouTube? They do not publish videos. So you're saying, oh my God, people aren't publishing on Twitter. Not every single person in the world publishes on Twitter. I honestly think it's amazing that 60% of Twitter members do publish. Because when you look over at YouTube, it's only 1% that publish videos and 10% that even comment and engage.
All right, so you're saying 60% publish, but not everybody publishes, but you're arguing for ubiquity. The problem here is, so Twitter has about 200 million tweets per day. That's about 2,300 tweets per second. That's pretty good. There are 34,000 Google searches per second, or 2 million per minute, or about 3 billion a day. And I would argue Google is ubiquitous. Like they have met the standard for what ubiquity is. It seems like Twitter is really far off from kind of being to that point. And yeah, if they were to that point, I could argue with you. Yeah, I could agree with you that, yeah, you know, it doesn't matter that only this percentage of people are publishing and using it because it's, you know, it's ubiquitous. They're there. But it seems like there's still a really big gap between where Google is and their kind of ubiquity in the world and where Twitter is.
So I would not for a moment try and make the case that Twitter is more ubiquitously used than Google. I'd have to be totally insane. Nobody's making that point.
Right, no, and it's not what I'm trying to make say that it should, but there's I'm just pointing out there's a large discrepancy between the two.
But of course, right? There's a large discrepancy between Google usage and everything. You know, except
Facebook and LinkedIn gets a little closer, but we can.
Well, that doesn't mean Twitter is dying. Right? You wrote on the board in 2012, Twitter dies,
well,
and I wrote, nope.
You paraphrased.
No, I didn't write. I don't know who wrote down your, your quote.
Did,
I saw your quote one day and went, "What? Are you crazy, Kip Bogner?
Maybe Gene or somebody did.
Are you absolutely crazy?" And I just simply said, "No." There's another thing we haven't talked about yet, and that's the upside threshold for total number of web browsers in the world. Right?
Right.
What? 1-2 billion now.
Yeah, probably higher than that. I haven't looked at the recent numbers, but
so
there's a lot.
Devices that can tweet. 5 billion people have access to a device that can tweet. 5 billion people, by picking up a dumb phone and sending 5 text messages, could publish a web page today from wherever in the world they are via SMS. That is enormous potential to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think people don't even know they can tweet by SMS largely across the board. So when you look at how the economy changed when the printing press was invented or when the telegraph came out, how will the economy change when 5 billion people realize they could be publishers right now?
They could be, but they aren't right
now. They could be, but
they aren't. My kind of response to that would be how...
Like Facebook doesn't have that kind of greenfield market space that it can go out and occupy, and Twitter has it, and Twitter has it right now.
Yes, the potential is there. It's just not being realized, which is a big difference. My question is Twitter a social network?
Yes.
Is Twitter more social today or less social today than 5 years ago when you joined it?
More social.
How so? Because I don't think it is. I think it is far less social.
I think it's done a way better job of permeating the average person, right, as opposed to the hardcore internet user.
That doesn't mean it's more social. It just means it has a bigger reach. I'm saying, on a given basis, do you think you interact and get more information from others on Twitter today than you did years ago when you first started?
Definitely more, because there's a lot more tools. You can search more effectively. You can filter out the noise much more effectively. There's not as much diversity of tools as I thought there would be, obviously, when I started 140, a Twitter app store, and that was Twitter's own choice to go with more of a monoculture of the product interface. I think they're going to reverse that in the next couple of years because I don't think it has scaled very well to the ordinary person. They're still struggling. Do we build Twitter for the power user? Do we build it for the ordinary user? And I think really a diversity of platforms is the answer.
So now that we're on this topic, the retail doctor's tweeting, how about speaking to all the robots and auto post? Where are the real people on Twitter?
There's plenty of junk, and the tools are getting better and better to filter it out.
I think we've got, 1 in 318 URLs on Twitter are retweeted. So I think that speaks to the noise that is on the network, right? 1 out of every 318 URLs on Twitter.
Isn't noise another way of saying there's tons and tons and tons of people using it?
No,
and bots.
Because of robots. Noise means noise. Noise doesn't mean human ideas, right? Our own Dan Zarella could tell you that he could write a little bot to have this crazy retweeting scheme and get followers. I think he's done it lots of different times. But not for himself, just for fun to play with it. So it's like, I think there's a discrepancy there between people actually using it and a lot of noise and junk on the platform, and I think that's kind of where the retail doc is coming from, and I think he's got a little concern about there. I mean, what do you think? I mean, you've used Twitter a long time. There's definitely a lot of spam, a lot of bots. If you especially if you have a popular hashtag today, like trending hashtags become corrupt really quickly. Like a lot of the stuff that used to be really valuable in Twitter is definitely less valuable, I think, today. But
again, if you're using the right tools, you filter all that stuff out.
How many people are using the right tools?
Okay.
Right, and can the mass culture really support using a lot of the tools that you're talking about? I don't know if they can.
I still don't see that as dying. Polluted, yes. needing much more filtration
Well,
and more advanced
isn't pollution
tools.
kind of an early stage of dying? Isn't pollution
tools.
kind of an early stage of dying? Isn't that kind of what happened with MySpace? Like, wasn't that like a leading indicator of death?
That's a really good point.
You know, like I think it is to some degree. Do we have other stuff?
What's
Other
interesting,
people?
I think there's something we haven't talked about yet is the distribution of usership, because we did not see a few years ago young adults using Twitter. And everybody said,
They were using
this
SMS.
network is doomed because it's not using Twitter. The numbers now have gotten ridiculous. 31% of 18 to 24s are using Twitter. So even if that rate doesn't increase, as that population ages and new young people keep coming up and using it at a drastically higher rate than older people are using it, the network will continue to grow. We also saw a doubling in the number of people who use it every single day. So you have a service that only 15% of all adults use, and you're saying, oh my God, that's such a small number. More than half of all the adults who use it every single day. And that's usage as defined by engaging with the software, where the real usage of Twitter is much more gigantic. I can't sit in a bar without seeing tweets all over all the televisions, all over the place. I don't have television at home, so I'm sure they're on at home too. That's the only time I watch.
Well, speaking of usage growth, from November 2010 to May 2011, Twitter use jumped from 8% to 13%. But that 13% only jumped to 15% in 2012. Does the change in percentage growth from year to year show that Twitter's going a little stagnant?
You're bracketing different time periods for those pew
Well,
numbers.
it's a little
They're not
different,
done annually,
correct,
they're done on
yeah.
different intervals. So those actually, that doesn't constitute a flattening of
Well, it
curve.
was 13 to 12 and then back up to 15 if you look at it
That's
that way.
true. There was one dip, which could be sampling error. The pew numbers are considered plus or minus 2.5%.
Right.
It's a very small sample.
So I found this stat interesting. I can't exactly remember where I found it, but so the average Twitter user. So let's just talk about the Twitter user for a minute. Likes 36% of the tweets that he or she reads. They find a positive affection to them. They dislike about 25% of the tweets they read, and they have no strong opinion about 39%. So you're telling me they either dislike or have no opinion about the majority of the content that they see on Twitter. What does that speak to the health of the network and the platform and the growth of the platform? I mean, that to me is really concerning. You know, I mean, I think it speaks back to the retail doctor's question about bots and quality of content and everything online. Like, what, I mean...
You can do anything you want with numbers. You could do that. I could come right back to you and say, well, the proportion who like or don't have an opinion is also overwhelmingly big, right?
Right, but I mean, not having an opinion is good.
People don't always have a strong
isn't
opinion
good.
on everything they do or read.
Right, but I would argue that apathy is terrible. It's probably the worst thing. As a marketer, the last thing you want is apathy. You don't want anybody to just not care about you. You'd rather almost have somebody dislike you than just not care or not know you exist.
And where you see apathy, I think overthinking, like, I don't really have opinions on most things I see or hear or read. I just see them, right? I don't go, oh, I like that. I don't like that.
Okay.
So maybe that's apathy. Maybe that's, I think you're pushing pretty hard on the numbers because you got to push pretty hard on the numbers because this thing is growing so fast that.
I don't know. I don't think growing so fast is really kind of an accurate statement. I think what's happening is that the use case is also rapidly shifting.
Absolutely,
right?
the use case is shifting.
The use case, it seems to me, and that's why I honestly get concerned for like the future health of the network. Like if you go in on an afternoon, what is the trending topic? The trending topic is whatever like crappy cable TV movie is playing that afternoon. It's just become like a sounding board for kind of mass media societal things. You know, we've got some more data here, which I think kind of could argue both.
AM radio?
I do not.
Okay. So is AM radio totally pointless because if you hear it all at once, you'd be overwhelmed? Like, what if you heard every single channel on AM radio all at once?
Imagine it wouldn't be useful.
Right. But if you use the right tool and you have a tuner and you're listening to just one and it's the one you like, now how do you feel about it?
I don't like the commercials, so I still wouldn't listen to it, but
You know,
that's
it's
beside
like
the
you're
point.
saying, oh my God, there's all this stuff on the air and I can't watch all of it at once. It's a very unsophisticated read of what Twitter is and how it's possible to be used.
So the argument that you're making,
email without a spam filter,
Right.
right? Go set up an old email system that has no spam controls the way Gmail does, because I know you and I are both on
We
Gmail.
both love
and
us
tell
for
me
Gmail.
that email is dying platform.
Right. No, email is not dying platform, but I guess the question is...
Because you have better tools, and you're sorting, and you're using it
But
intelligently.
who is going to... who's going to promote the advocacy of those tools? You're basically saying that the only way Twitter is going to continue to grow and be successful if people adopt the right tools to find the stuff that they need.
But that's already happening.
It is to some degree.
You know, journalists have very high-end stuff to watch the stream and look for emergent trends, new things that are happening as opposed to the trending topics as we know it. Twitter itself has finally launched trends amongst your friends, which is, oh my God, we've needed friends trends for 4 years. That shows you what the people you've curated in different ways are interested in.
So I'm kind of curious because
the signal to noise ratio, I think, is improving.
You're advocating for tools, but before we got on the air, you were talking about you think the vast majority of normal Twitter users use Twitter.com.
Aren't using tools. That's true.
They're not using tools.
That's true.
So does that change? Because if that changes and how it changes, I think you could sway me towards your side, but I don't know how that changes.
Let's go back to that usage kind of nucleus and umbrella that I was talking about earlier, where people who log into the software here, people who are using Twitter in some way in the journalism sector, in the education sector, in the just networking, marketing, economic analysis of breakout events, journalism. There's so much. Those people are using tools to pick out which tweets are going to go where, and then those tweets are going on New York Times. They're going on every website you go to. There's some tweet somewhere. They're going on the air. They're going on the radio. They're going in print. I see tweets in the newspaper, right?
So what you're
That's what
you're
talking
arguing
about.
Twitter is a media company, not a social media company.
How can you say it's not social?
Because how social is a tweet embedded in the sidebar of the New York Times?
I think it's very social because you can see that and go, oh, I know how to go follow that person on Twitter. I know how to go retweet that tweet. I know how to go see who that person is.
Does the normal person really know how to do that stuff, though? Does the normal person really know how to do that? I question that they actually know.
So you're saying because the media literacy isn't there yet, the platform will die.
I'm saying there's a big gap in literacy.
Drastic signs of increasing.
I'm saying you're arguing for a lot of things that need to happen to continue growth and success, and I think it's hard to have all of those things happen.
Show me one number that shows it's flat or shrinking. Because if it's going to peak in 2012, it's almost July. When's it going to start shrinking?
It's a good question.
Show me one number.
I will concede to the next Edison results and the next survey that comes out this year.
I've heard there's tons and tons of content on it. There's too much content on it. That's not a sign of shrinking. I've heard there's too much pollution on it. That's not a sign of shrinking. Or email would have died long
content
ago.
And pollution are both signs of shrinking because they may not come from real people.
It's peaked.
They may not come from real people.
They may not.
That's what killed MySpace. That's what's killed all of these things.
They may not come from real people.
Well, yes, because you can't tell me what the percent of what you're arguing, all this growth and usage and messages is actually legitimate, right? What is legit? Because if you could, then no, we can't. I think if we could, we probably wouldn't be sitting here. The argument would be done. Do we have other people on Twitter yelling at us?
We have lots of Twitter conversation. I do want to give one plug to the inbound tickets. Again, so the top 3 tweeters tweeting at MKTG Debate. The most tweets with the hashtag will get a free ticket to inbound, where both of these two will be there. So you can come and hate on them in live.
Amazing marketing conference in Boston at the end of August.
Please come.
Gary Vaynerchuk is one of the big keynotes. David Herman
Scott ran Fishkin from SEO.
Fishkin, SEO. Amazing parties, real South by Southwest style parties. It is going to be quite a scene. 2,000 marketers coming to
and
Boston.
An awesome time of the year to be in Boston. So even if you don't win the free tickets, please come to Inbound.
Absolutely
it's going to be great.
You can also buy tickets and get 25% off if you use the discount code MKTG Debate. So if you want to go just purchase a ticket for you and your friends, you can use that code and get a 25% discount. Now, speaking of all this Twitter stuff we're doing, one interesting comment someone left on Facebook is if Twitter is dying, why are we using Twitter to hand out these tickets, to promote this debate, to use the hashtag? So what does this say about Twitter in the sense of a media platform and not a social platform?
So first of all, I think the bifurcation between social media and media has been a temporary thing all along. I remember speaking on keynote stages 4 or 5 years ago and saying, we're going to just call this media at some point. We don't call it billboard media anymore. We don't call it television. Well, we do sort of. But, it's So saying it's not social, I still haven't heard one I've heard it's messy. I've heard there may be a lot of bots there. I have not heard one iota of evidence saying it's not social. And I would also like to give you a question to answer.
Sweet.
Name for me the list of social networks that Pew asks about by name when it's doing its research.
I think Twitter's one of them. I think it's Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, basically, right?
So
I think is the last time,
there's
with the last report.
There's one survey in which they ask about Facebook, LinkedIn, but their main survey, the only one is Twitter.
Okay.
They made an exception in 2010. It was unprecedented that they added just Twitter to that research, and it's because they saw how it was shaping and reshaping the fabric of media itself, not just social media.
And it's interesting, and I don't disagree that it has an impact on the mainstream media, and I think it has provided a lot of relevant data and everything to mainstream media. I still kind of have a big problem with the gap of awareness and usage in mainstream media. I think that is a major issue that is concerning. And yes, if Pew came out with the study today and Twitter growth was up 5% from last year, like, I'd be wrong, you'd be right, but we'll see. We'll see when that comes out. But that is very, very concerning data to me still, and it's still kind of about, to me, how do we use what we've got on the platform? And it's still a lot of noise. There's still, 61% of Twitter users follow people they know personally, which I actually think is pretty good. 53% follow celebrities, which is also interesting to some degree, way different than I think it used to be. And 42% follow brands or companies. So there's a lot
which is a huge number.
That is a pretty impressive number. Only 33% follow news outlets, which I think is actually kind of interesting. And 17% follow coworkers or business associates. So that kind of demonstrates that LinkedIn is still kind of, I think, the winner for that kind of peer-to-peer, coworker, probably connection, interaction.
For what other platform is there that much of diversity among the number of different use cases you can make of it? I mean, that's an incredible, I would have used that on my side if I had found that first, right? That is an incredible array of different things you can do on Twitter. That is not proof of a dying network. It's
definitely an array, but I would argue that Facebook and LinkedIn are both better at a lot of those. One question that I did get...
When you look at how it performs for businesses, I mean, the click-through rates on a promoted tweet with a promoted trend are in the single digits compared with hundredths of a point click-through rates for banner and display advertising online.
Correct.
Tremendous business results being generated.
Good click-through rate there, but I know for HubSpot we have a lower visitor lead conversion rate from traffic from Twitter, and I know that historically it has been a less significant lead generation from social media sources than something like LinkedIn, something even like Facebook, which we've done a nice job at.
Are you counting, so with Twitter, about 50% of traffic that comes from Twitter isn't noticeable as being from Twitter?
Right, there's,
so
we
take
that.
the numbers you know,
there's a little direct
double-ish them.
Double-ish. I think double-ish is very, very, very generous. I think, from talking with the dev folks, they've gotten a lot closer than double-ish, but I think...
Well, it's not, no, I'm not saying anything's wrong with our software. I'm saying the nature of Twitter and the way it gets shared and passed along, and the way messages do not propagate on Facebook
but you could
the way they propagate on Twitter. They don't propagate on email the way they propagate on Twitter. They don't propagate on blogs the way they can propagate on Twitter.
So maybe messages don't, but I'd argue, and this is I have a tweet here I want to credit somebody from earlier. This is from, I don't know, there's too many streams. There's some awesome lady, Social Sam on Twitter, talked about how she thinks Twitter's kind of dying because content is getting more visual. And if you look at Pinterest and Facebook and Google+, the content there is inherently more visual. Visuals in line, you've got a lot, it's highly, a much bigger part of it. And Twitter has always kind of been about a headline and a link and that kind of thing. So I know Twitter's made a little strides to kind of catch up there, but it still seems to seem like they're lagging behind. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I see a big image on Facebook, it spreads like wildfire. Is that a little Mark Cuban Twitter picture? Yeah, what did you have to do? You had to click through to the individual tweet to see that. In Facebook, I don't have to click anything. I scroll and I see stuff.
Yeah, and it's really inefficient because you got to scroll through all that junk that your friends are posting. Whereas Twitter, I can drill right down into the one I want to see, play videos right in the tweet.
Facebook shows me the stuff that I click onto, like, comment, and everything. Twitter just shows me everything.
Do you really think Facebook and Twitter are an either or?
Not necessarily. I think that visual content is kind of becoming a much bigger part of how we learn, view, interact with people online. And I think Twitter is
not a visual medium.
Less set up for success with visual content than other mediums. Facebook, Google+, Pinterest, predominantly.
So what would you say was the thing that propagated the spread of an app like Instagram if it wasn't the fact that everybody was sharing it via Twitter? Tweeting out their Instagrams, tweeting out their Facebook Foursquare check-ins, tweeting out their food spotting. You know, all the visual mediums you're talking about that are blowing up, they're blowing up on Facebook and they're blowing up on Twitter. I mean, it's the circulatory system that gets these things out there. Like all the other apps, not as many apps post to Facebook as post to Twitter. There are more that post to Twitter.
Right, there are more that post to Twitter. I would argue, is that a good thing?
It's like the railroad.
Is that just
it's like
more,
the railroad of the internet.
Is that just more noise? We've you know, I mean, no, I mean.
If it's so loud, how is it shrinking?
Because when you hear everything, you hear nothing, right? I mean, and I know that you've probably listened to a lot of people complaining about people posting like Foursquare check-ins and a lot of this stuff on Twitter, and that they don't want to see it, and that they don't like that. So yes, people are posting it, but is it really the behavior people want? Is it really why people are even on the network to begin with?
I do still feel like people who are making that case like are in their car and have the radio tuned to the wrong channel and are too stupid to turn the dial, right? If someone's posting crap, don't follow them.
Fair, fair.
Let me show you the button.
People don't. There's a follow button. Yes.
Unfollow. Done. No one's posting crap
I think
anymore.
People do that, but you're arguing that that happens at a mass scale. So you just think that people should just unfollow, like spend a lot of their time unfollowing.
I think it's a really bad idea to go sit in your living room and turn on a TV show you hate and watch it for 3 hours. I do. It's shocking. It's a radical stance I have.
I mean, it is.
But hey. Or to channel surf so quickly that you can't consume any bit of any one show, right? That would make TV a maddening, dying medium.
But
if you had somebody in your living room who stole your remote and just went...
You're arguing that people...
You'd hate television.
But you're arguing that people...
So don't do it!
...know how to do everything that you're talking about. If I just...
It's so hard to click unfollow when somebody...
No, but you have to...
You're right, Twitter's screwed!
But you have to care enough
Twitter is going
to click
down!
unfollow.
You're going down!
No, you have to care enough to click unfollow.
Let's hear from this audience. Who is winning this debate?
I am. No, you have...
If you raise your hand while they're clapping for me, that doesn't mean they're clapping for you.
They're clapping for you because you asked them.
That was a super good try, because you're... Well,
who thinks I'm winning?
Whoa! You guys are cold. Give him some love. At least give him the like half-hearted.
No, but you're arguing that.
I love that my marketing update co-host is the only person clapping for you. He is so going down this afternoon. We will be back at HubSpot.tv. I will be back. He will be gone.
Okay.
I may have to kick Sam out and make an encore appearance just so we can continue this.
Okay, so we have to wrap up soon, but I want to ask one last question because we are marketers, and so when we did the HubSpot State of Inbound Marketing report in 2012, we said that a third of marketers say that Twitter is either important or critical to their business. So what does this say about Twitter's value in a business sense?
I think 1/3 said it was critical.
Yeah. Right, critical or important. Yep.
So it's pretty huge because when you looped in the number who thought it was useful to that, it was like 70% with the two summed together. I think that was a really, really big deal. And I think the performance we're seeing in promoted products, the ability to actually drive consumers to an event, drive consumers to a store, there's some pretty amazing data coming out on the business side.
And anything to share there? Like what's standing out on the business side?
I
mean, because ultimately we want marketers to take away stuff that's going to be super helpful for them.
Ian Schaefer at the Twitter, right before the Twitter for Brands conference, was citing 3 to 7% click-through rates on a promoted tweet where you also promote the trend, and contrasting that to 0.001 click-through rates on advertising generally.
Yeah, I mean, again, we can make numbers do anything, and comparing anything to banner ads, you'll make it look good, right? Like, banner ads are like the worst thing about the internet. Like, if we're going to disagree on all this stuff, we can at least agree on banner ads.
Oh wait, sorry, I was clicking on a banner ad. There's some weird trick to reduce my stomach.
Yeah, it's a surgery from a plastic surgeon banner ad.
Oh yeah, it says run up and down a ski slope multiple times a week. That will reduce your stomach. That is a weird trick. Which is exactly what I've been doing. But
that sounds terrible.
I'm training for the Tough Mudder.
Don't they electrocute you in those things?
Yes.
So you're gonna side with somebody who gets electrocuted running up a hill? I win.
All right, so it looks like that's a wrap, everyone. If you want to vote for who you think held the best argument, go to HubSpot.com/marketingdebate where you're watching this live stream right now. And if you go to the bottom left corner, there's a little poll, and we can raise that up if you want, and just click either Laura or Kip. And in about an hour, we'll post who won right on that page. And again, you have the 25% off discount to inbound if you just use MKT Debate. And that's a wrap. Thanks you guys.
Everyone.
Thank you.
It was good. Thank you.